If you had to describe the source books of Mystara in a single word, it would be uneven. You have masterpieces like Keramikos and Glantry, duds like Etruscan and Irindi. A few are written with a completely different feel from the entire series, like Orcs of Thar. Others ignore existing lore and make massive additions to the setting without any thought of what it's going to do to the continuity, such as the Northern Reaches. Then you've got Dawn of the Emperors, the Theatis Alphatia box set, which doesn't give you nearly enough on either, giving you two half-finished setting guides that should have each been their own box set. We can only dream of a fully realized look at the empires instead of what most people's reactions were.
You got your favorite thing, disappointment.
But the fan base couldn't let it rest. Mystara's line editor, Bruce Hurd, decided to give Alphatia the love it needed and kept fleshing out the Empire's kingdoms a decade after the line was killed, long after TSR was no more. That brings us to today's video, the Kingdom of E-Adrin, or E-Adrin. There's no pronunciation guide either. And no, despite the similarities, it has nothing to do with the Elves Mark II. I'm Mr. Welch, welcome to Mystara, and let's finish that map. The source material for this video was taken entirely from Bruce Hurd's blog, where he decided over a decade ago to finish Alphatia's missing kingdoms. They weren't missing on the map, granted. E-Adrin is located in southeastern Alphatia, situated between Aragonsa and Randall, and he gets precisely 0 mentions in the box set. It's a complete mystery for what's there. According to the original source material, we know it has 5 cities. The capital is Archport, and it appears to be primarily plains with some hills and forests in a small location. It's left for the DMs to fill in, and they get nothing to work with. Bruce wasn't okay with this and decided to give the kingdom the love it deserves, along with a host of other nations that suffered the same fate. I'll share his blog's link in the description. This is technically fanon, but it's by the guy who was in charge of Mystara for most of its run, making this official fanon. E-Adrin is a surprisingly heavily populated farming kingdom, and one of the smallest ones in Alphatia by size, despite having nearly 1 million people living there. It is dwarfed by its neighbors, the aforementioned Aragonsa and Randall. Its chief business is tourism, mainly from its pristine shores. The updated nation is much more forested than the original map, befitting a nation predominantly farmers. It's not wall-to-wall trees, but it is more than just one small forest and otherwise dull flatlands. And as you can tell by the new maps, there is more to this nation than people expect. It has few visitors. It's not that they're hostile, at least openly, but it's considered a backwater kingdom surrounded by far more exciting options. They have a few tourist locations, but Aragonsa dominates the economy in that sector. It has some mineral wealth, but not enough to attract the attention of its neighbors. To all concerned, E-Adrin's a backwater where they run around their forests frolicking and leaving everyone else alone. The fewer tourists visit their shoreline locations because of the lower costs compared to Aragonsa, but are told the interior consists of nothing but agriculture. Despite 70% of the population being farmers, the nation still imports food. It doesn't have the size to grow all the crops to support its population. The nation does have a large standing army, despite not having a militaristic bent, due entirely to the Kingdom of Randall, their northern neighbor. Randall likes a good scrum, even if E-Adrin has nothing that the nation really needs. They've already skirmished with them in the past, just for practice. This is rare, as other countries provide a better challenge, so they keep Randall's attention. The rest of the nation is devoted to standard Alphatian industries, including animal goods and timber. The cities focus on hospitality, shipbuilding, books, and of course making magic items. The population is mainly human, but with a not small number of elves. Those are normally of the Sylvan variety, except for the ruling families, which have an unusual variation of that type of elf. There's not much in the way of other races, and humanoids here are unheard of. The nation still has a monster problem, but these are often extraplanar in nature. The capital of Eadrin is Archport, also known by its nickname, the City of Eternal Twilight. For unknown reasons, at least of the population, it's always dusk at Archport. The sun never quite rises, and night never completely chases away the light. During the day, the sun's rays don't fully reach the city. At night, it seems to glow faintly. The citizens don't question this unusual situation. It's always been this way. Archport is a large city. 20% of the nation's population resides in its walls. The strange shadow magic doesn't have a negative effect on people, whether they are residents or visitors. Plants grow without problem. It's unnerving to people experiencing it for the first time, for sure, and many sailors prefer to land at the nearby ports of Ascopol or Clarmedon in Aragonsa, even if they are much smaller than Archport. Natives of the capital rarely leave the city and must wear eye protection when they experience direct sunlight, until they can adjust appropriately. As you can expect, the local population is pale-skinned, but they don't see anything odd about their city. They tend to wear dark clothing as a preferred fashion, with hooded cloaks or large-brimmed hats. Few travel outside their hometown and tend to stick out in other locations like Wednesday Addams at a holy festival. Despite their monochrome inclinations, it doesn't affect their personalities. You are just as likely to find a chipper and happy archporter as a completely miserable one. Other than the fact that they live in complete shadow their entire lives, they're regular people. The capital is the first indication that something is amiss in Eadrin, and few are willing to look past it. And the nation's secrets are well guarded. The ruler of Eadrin is Queen Eadrin the 13th, one of the most memorable nobles in all of Alphatian. Eadrin and her kin are dusk elves. Not the ones from Ravenloft, but an endemic variation of sylvan elves located only in Eadrin. They have stone-gray skin and eyes the color of pearls, but they have the typical hair color for elves. Dusk elves are known for their eccentric personalities, and Eadrin is no exception. She's usually dour, but she's also insatiably curious. She is solid neutral in most things. The queen knows she must protect her people against the creatures of darkness who find Archport a perfect home, but she does so out of duty rather than mercy. The rest of the royal family is similar. They all tend to be antisocial, but also desire to learn new things. The queen is generally a hands-off ruler. She leaves her country's day-to-day operations to the nobles below her. The rulers of the various domains, called seas, not like ocean seas, but like ice seas use, are called the Shadow Lords, and also take a light touch when running their domains. Like most Alphatian nobles, they prefer to be left alone to do their studies. Their castles are famous for their defensive capabilities, though the nation hasn't been attacked in living memory. And nobody precisely remembers what the castle's capabilities are, only that the Lords of Randall have stopped raiding Eadrin domain for easier targets. It is a source of pride, though the commoners aren't too interested in ancient history as their daily lives are far more pressing. The lives of the population of Eadrin are relatively uneventful, despite their nation's oddities. Their leaders are focused on their studies, which align with other Alphatian rulers, but take care of at least the population's minimum needs. Crime is harshly punished, but trials are fair. People are expected to handle their problems, and city governments step up when needed. Food costs are a bit higher than normal because the nation can't grow enough food to sustain its population, because it is tiny. Trade is encouraged and makes up a large portion of the tax revenue. Actual taxes on the population are reasonable but not substantial. You're not getting much money from a farmer or a lumberjack. The military patrols for excursions from Randall and deals with monsters that occasionally appear. Aside from their quirky rulers and the magical mystery of Archport, Eadrin deserves its reputation for being dull and an out-of-the-way kingdom of the Alphatian Empire. But this being Mystara, there's always a catch. In the eastern part of the nation, in the Sea of Obscurata, lies the largest body of water in Eadrin, the Well of Shadows. It's off-limits to visitors, and only those who work the mines or study the lake are allowed near it. The surrounding hills are riddled with caves, and the region is plagued with monsters that emerge from them regularly. The source of the caves is unknown. They seem to go on forever, and few that explore them return. Those that do make it back are often struck mad, and all of them are physically changed by their journey. Queen Eadrin's ancestors were some of the few that survived one of these expeditions. Entering one of the caves causes a magical compulsion to keep going, something few mortals can resist. As you descend, the darkness becomes pervasive. Handheld light sources illuminate far less than what they should. Magical lights grow dimmer, almost with every step. Still, explorers are compelled to keep going in the cave. They are part of an extra-dimensional portal leading to a place you really don't want to be. No, not the Plane of Shadow, that's the obvious choice. But that would be boring and predictable. Bruce is anything but boring and predictable. Instead, it led to the Vortex Dimension. That's the dimension that leads to the home of the Old Ones. The dimension that chews up and spits out immortals if it doesn't kill them outright. This place is lethal to deities. So how did some paltry mortals return alive? That's the mystery. Something lured them in, and something let them out. Changed, most driven hopelessly insane, but alive nonetheless. And they returned with the knowledge of a new type of magic. Shadow magic. The Shadow Lords are the few descendants of those who made the initial journeys into the caves of the Well of Shadows and returned. Though most are dusk elves, they're all marked by their ancestors' journey. The nobles lack the total madness that a good chunk of their ancestors returned with, but still have some of their quirks. They all possess the same mental traits, glum personalities, and endless curiosity. This is great for wizards conducting magical research, but not so great for the leaders of a nation. Fortunately, the Dusk Elves concentrate on the magic part instead of the administration part. The local population is more than happy to ignore their weird nobles, as they're not malicious and usually aren't seen in public or on holidays or civic events. So no, they're not evil, but they're not good either. They are self-absorbed wizards who practice their chosen research like most of their kind in Alphatia and try to ignore everything else. The caves also possess a mineral called Nightstone. These strange rocks absorb direct sunlight but also glow in total darkness. The Dusk Elves are trying to figure out what exactly they can be used for. They maintain a constant twilight in the area where they're placed. These stones are the source of Archport's unusual properties and are a significant source of research for the Dusk Elves. The caves around the Well of Shadows have been turned into mines for Nightstone, though they have been sealed off to prevent miners from wandering off into one of the deadliest locations in the multiverse. Shadow magic is just what you expect, dealing with all spells that create, modify, or deal with shadows. The spells in this new school of magic are more potent than the regular versions, but aren't overwhelming either. The Shadow Lords are driven to discover everything there is to know about the Nightstones and the shadow magic. And E-Adrin is the only place that provides them with both. If other Alphatian kingdoms learned about the magical mysteries here, they would stop at nothing to acquire them for their own uses. Fortunately, E-Adrin is too boring to be noticed, and that's just the way the Shadow Lords like it. That's E-Adrin, the first of the Bruce herd expanded Alphatian kingdoms. It's not going to be the last one either. Next up is another mystery, the Irindi Gravekeeper, Jamie Honey Creeper Ahua. A guy so good at his job, he's been doing it for centuries. Until then, remember to stay in the light.